seventh grade teacher, and she said,
We were talking this morning to Dr. Louis Segalla, a longtime Canaan, indeed a Canaan native, right? You were born in Canaan?
yes.
Okay. The way I like to work in these, so that we make sure that we don't miss big factors in a person's life, is to start at the beginning and come up to the present. So why don't we start by talking about your family? I understand that you're of Italian extraction. Were your folks from the old country?
Yes.
Do you know where they came from and how they got here?
They came from the province of Vicenza in Italy, northern Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And they came around 1911 or 12, somewhere along there. And they had about a third grade education at all, and all they had was the clothes on their back practically, so they were poor immigrants. But
Were they
they
married?
came here for a better way of life.
Were they married at the time they came here, or did they meet in this
No,
country?
when they came here, then my father came first, and then she came over afterward, and then they were married in Lakeville, because
really?
the Catholic Church was not here in Canaan at the time.
So they knew each other, and
Oh,
then he
yeah,
brought her over afterwards,
yeah.
and they were married here. Did they make their home right here in Canaan from the beginning?
Yeah, right from the beginning.
Do you know what brought them here?
They came here, you mean to Canaan?
Yeah.
Well, they knew people who had come here before they did, and so they thought there was plenty of work here, and so on. That's what they were trying to do, is get a job, work.
I always think it must take such incredible courage to get on a boat and go to a country where you don't speak the language and you really have no resources to get you started. I've always marveled at the people who have had the courage to do that and then work so hard and raise their families. You know, that's amazing to me. What did your father do?
Well, at his first jobs, he was working with a team of horses, and he used to draw wood into the iron ore furnaces. See, and that's what he did first. And then eventually he started to get in the business of his own, and he would do some logging and make lumber, and then he got selling fireplace wood, and he would buy land just for the sake of cutting the trees down to get wood. And then after that, he got into the ice business, because we didn't have electric refrigeration at that time, and so we peddled ice. And as a kid, I used to go with him peddling ice when I was about 12 years old.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we all had to work very hard.
Now, it came in big blocks?
Yeah.
And people would just put that block in there?
We cut the ice off the Zetterstrom quarry up on the Clayton Road, and stored it there and covered it with sawdust. And then you'd have to dig the thing out and go over on the other side of the quarry and wash it, and then go and peddle it.
Now, he had the storage place right there by the quarry, didn't he, across the road?
Yeah.
And I always understood that harvesting ice was really dangerous business, because you just putting the blocks into the warehouses was relatively difficult.
Yeah, it was dangerous. If you fell into that quarry, you had to cut ice off and make a channel to pull the pieces of ice. And one man did fall in, and George Lafargue was running the hoist that drew the ice up in blocks and slide it off into the ice house. And this man was working along the channel, and he fell in. So George grabbed a hold of one of these ice hooks, you see, and he hooked it onto this guy's jacket. He had a leather jacket that was brand new. And he pulled him out, and he saved his life. And the guy said, "Damn you, George, you ruined my brand new leather jacket." But he said, "I saved your life."
Yeah, with a leather jacket on, he would probably have gone down for the count.
That's right, he would have. Yeah.
So you had brothers and sisters?
Well, we were 6 boys in our family. I'm the third of the 6.
And your father and mother were named?
My father's name was John, and my mother's name was Justina, Giustina.
And she worked in the home. Women
Yes,
didn't work outside very much then.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about your home life when you were a boy? What it was like? I mean, did your mom? Henry Pizzetta told us wonderful stories about preparing food for the house and things like that. Did she do all that food production there?
Everything was prepared at home. We had a big garden, and we had a little bit of a farm. We had a cow or two to get our milk, and made our own butter and cheese, and she did all the work around, and cooked everything there for us. And,
hard work.
yeah, hard work.
Day before washing machines, it must have been a devil of a job to keep up with 6 boys.
That's true.
I wouldn't have wanted to do it.
And we all had to work, and work real hard. I mean, because, when there were no loafing, no running downtown, it was always at home, so we never got in any trouble. We
You
just
folks-
had to stay around home.
You lived in the northern section of town, is that right?
Yeah, right up near the police barracks.
Now, I remember somebody told us that there were different names to different parts of the town. Do you remember what that name up
Well,
there
they
was?
called that Sandtown because where the police barracks is was, before they came there, was all sand. And a little few brush growing on there, and we used to play in the sand when we were real kids, and then the police barracks came along that took all that away. And we used to do skating on the little pond that was behind the barracks. That's still there, skating, and made our own raft out of logs. And,
Really?
And sometimes we'd fall in and go through the ice skating.
Yeah, people were a lot less careful then. I mean, can you imagine an organization like the old Borden Milk Factory letting kids skate on a pond? Now they'd be so afraid someone would sue. Played ball up in that area where there was a ball team?
We had a ball team of our own. There were, you may be interested in this, there were 3 Segalla brothers who came over here, and they all lived in the same area. My father was John, and then there was Achille, or was the younger of the 3, the youngest of the 3, and Leo was the oldest of the 3. And they all lived in the same neighborhood. And so we, at one time, where they have that ball field up there now, we had a baseball team made up of all Segallas. And we called ourselves the Sandtown Raggies.
Now, you would have gone to school down in the center of town.
Yeah, we had to walk. The school was on Granite Avenue, and the building is no longer there. And when the school got larger, they had to put a couple of portable buildings back in what was our play yard.
So you would have walked down, that's about a mile. You would have walked roughly a mile to school.
There were no buses.
Right.
We walked a mile down every day, and a mile back.
And did you come home for lunch, or did you take your lunch with
No, we
you?
took our lunch with us.
Yeah.
They didn't serve these free lunches there.
No.
No cafeterias.
No. Even when I went to school there, they, I went home because I was in the center, but they had to supply your own lunch.
The elementary school was downstairs, and the high school was upstairs. They had 4 rooms, and the principal's office upstairs.
Did you graduate high school there?
I graduated in 1937.
Okay, so you were just before the regional school.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Now, kids from other towns came to the Canaan High School, though, right? So
Kids from Falls Village and from the Cornwall area.
And they came up on the train?
That's right, on the train.
So you did have some interaction even before the regional high school with folks from other towns.
Give you an idea of the size of the place. There were only about 32 kids in my class. So there were, less than 100 practically in the whole high school.
Now, you were saying earlier that during your growing years, you encountered some prejudice in the community. That's something that other interviewees have been very reluctant to address, so I'm glad I'm glad you brought it up. I'd like to talk about your experience that way.
Well, we used to walk to school, and in those days, the people working on the state highway didn't have all this machinery, so there would be 4 or 5 men with rakes and shovels working along the road, and we had to walk by those people going to school, and they'd start calling us guinea wops and all that, and go back to the sands where you belong. And finally we'd get fed up with that, and we would walk over to the railroad track, and then, to avoid them if we saw them down there, see, and avoid them, and then we getting the same type of prejudice showed up in the school. And one example is when I was in 8th grade, they had this George Pete Prize, just a little bronze medallion for the outstanding member of the 8th grade. And I overheard a conversation between my 7th grade teacher and my 8th grade teacher. It was during a recess period, and the 7th grade teacher, who had me as a student in 7th grade, asked the 8th grade teacher who's going to get the George Pete Prize this year. I imagine it will be Louis Segalla. I had him 7th grade, and he seems head and shoulders above everybody else. And the answer she got for that was, "Oh no, I can't give it to him." And she said, "Why not?" And she said, "Because he's Italian and Catholic, I can't give it to him." And I had above 90 in every subject that I had.
No, that's ridiculous.
And in addition to I didn't have the value of having a teacher, because I was put out in the cloakroom outside practically all day teaching Louis Avignon, who just came over from Italy.
Really?
He couldn't speak a word of English, and I couldn't speak very much Italian, but I could make out with him, and so I had to teach him English.
Wow.
See, so I didn't have the
Now, were there many kids in the classes in those days that were primarily Italian speaking or bilingual? I mean,
yeah, there were some. So I had to teach. All us kids had to more or less learn English in school, and then teach our parents English while they're teaching us Italian.
You spoke Italian in your home?
Yeah.
That's wonderful, actually.
And then a little bit more on this prejudice thing. When I got to be a junior in high school, I had a new teacher in my junior year who was just graduated, young man just graduated from Boston University. And he taught U.S. history. And he was always giving me the needle about being Italian and Catholic, and saying to me, "What are you doing, or what are you Italians doing with your Italian army down in Ethiopia?" All of this sort of stuff. So, he would give me a 89.
Okay.
So this teacher in my junior year of high school used to give me every marking period either an 88 or 89 to keep my grade below 90, to try to keep me off the honor roll, because you had to have 4 subjects or more with 90 or above in order to make the high honor roll, and 3 courses at least with 90 or above for the honor roll. And so this bothered me, and this sort of treatment that I received, this prejudice treatment, gave me the inspiration and the determination to make something of myself, to prove that there's nothing wrong with being Italian and Catholic. And so actually it was a blessing in disguise that this prejudice occurred.
Now, there must have been a fair proportion of kids in the school who were Italian, though, because there were a lot of immigrant families in town by that time.
Well, yes, and there was another one that I can remember in my class, Francis Rassiga, and he used to get the same sort of treatment. And then, this is hard to believe, but as years went by, Mr. Pine, who was the teacher, lost his wife. His wife died, and he ended up marrying Francis Rassica's sister, Anita,
Oh, really?
who was in the class of 1932. She was ahead of me. She was in my brother Stanley's class in high school. So they're still married. And
Isn't that
out,
wonderful?
They live out in the...
Well, he showed he could grow, right?
Yeah.
He showed that he wasn't so hidebound that he couldn't change.
But he admitted to me that he did wrong, and he apologized, and we've become good friends through the years. And I always invite him to our high school reunions, and I give up my double bed in my bedroom for him and his wife, and I put the other members of the faculty in other rooms.
How many of the faculty are still alive?
There's only one. No, there's two. There's Lee Pine and Elma DeBruin Career. DeBruin was her maiden name. She married after the war. She married a man named Career.
So they must be in their 90s now, maybe?
Well, 88, 89.
Hardy folks.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, I want to stay with high school for just a little while here, and then I want to talk about the aftermath of school, what happened to your class there. But I want to talk about the physical plant a little bit. I remember that school until the fourth grade. I went through the fourth grade there. And I kind of have fond memories of the building. I think it was a nice building, a friendly building. And it had nice light in it, as I remember. Lots of good wood and...
Oily floors.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
And furnished, or they burned wood and coal in the furnace.
Yeah. Do you remember the feeling of that building with the big windows and the tree out in front?
Oh, yeah.
And it was just a lovely place, don't you think?
Yeah.
And the kind of sloping, unpaved area out back where we used to play ball and stuff like that.
I used to plan to get to school during the winter months when they were using heat. Get down there early, and I would go down in the basement. He let me in. Dan Sweeney was the janitor, and he would let me in, and so I would wheel the wheelbarrow full of ashes out and dump it in the play yard. So I remember that very clearly.
Yeah, to keep the people from slipping on the snow. Is that what they were doing with the ashes?
Yeah.
And of course, it was always the thing to be allowed to do the boards, to erase the boards at night. I liked that building. I can remember very clearly being in it, and the sounds and the smell and the light in it.
I'd like to point out too, there is a plaque on the front of that building. The building is no longer there, and there's a plaque there. And I was one of the members of the committee that got together and raised enough money amongst us to put that plaque up there, citing it as a historical building. And I gave the speech pointing out the different people who did something in life with their education who went there, doctors, lawyers, farmers, and engineers, and all of that. And it's quite amazing when you go down the list of, we've had a physician out of there, Dr. Salou was out of there, and a lot of people in those days went to RPI, and they became engineers, and so there were a lot of
Got a good, strong education.
Good, strong education.
Now, I think it's kind of fitting that that you went there and you kind of had to struggle socially, if not academically, there to find your niche in this community. And then you turned around and you were one of the movers and shakers that built the new school.
Yeah.
So
I talk about when I left high school and went to college, I was a little bit scared about the academic part of it. I said, gee, there'll be kids out of big schools in the cities, and I'll be up against their records. But I found out that I was doing better than they were doing, and because I felt we got a real good college education, college entrance education at Canaan High School. It worked good for me.
now, how did you get to college? Did you do scholarships, or had your folks saved money?
There were no scholarships available. I talked with Frank Richardson, who was a principal at the time, and I told him what I would like to do with my life, and what I told him was I would like to teach at the high school level and coach athletics and teach science, chemistry, and that's at the college level. And he suggested that I apply to Springfield College, Springfield, Massachusetts. And they had a scholarship if you were in the 10% of your top 10% in your class. They would give you a short scholarship, maybe of $100. But in those days, the tuition was only about $500. So that did help.
Yeah, that would be a.
And there were no other scholarships in those days.
Did you work while you were going through school?
Oh yes, I did part-time work.
Now your family had 6 boys. How many of you went to school?
Well, there's Stanley, he was the oldest. He graduated from Bay Path in Chicago. In Springfield. Bay Path Institute. My brother Tony graduated from there, and my brother Armando, and they called him Mono, he graduated from there. And I graduated from Springfield College, and my brother Frank, who was the youngest in their family, he is a graduate of the University of Connecticut. And my brother John, who was next to the youngest, didn't want to go to college. He was interested in machinery, and so he didn't want to go to college, and he worked on the farm during the war, and then he went over to Amenia. He bought a little gravel business over there and started his business there.
And did very well indeed. There we are. I think that's an amazing record. I mean, if you stop to think about it, think of your parents, young people coming over here, no education, no real possibilities that appeared, like bright shining stars, and they raised you kids, and all of you became college-educated, successful people. I think that's just a marvelous story. And as you say, it wasn't because everybody greeted the Italian families here with open arms. So it was by dint of huge work and a great deal of perseverance. You say you started out to be a teaching candidate. Did you ever become a teacher?
No, I never did. I can tell you how that happened. When I went to
Just don't worry about it.
when I went to Springfield College, two of the subjects that I had to take. I went there, first of all, with a major in physical education and a minor in chemistry and general science. And so 2 of the courses were very appealing to me and very fascinating. They were anatomy, human anatomy, and physiology. And then we had to apply the knowledge that we had out of those 2 subjects, apply the knowledge to over in the college infirmary, apply it to the diagnosis and the treatment of athletic injuries, all athletic injuries. We did that work under supervision. And so that got me very interested in a career in medicine. And I got a little boost, a little interest from it from the teacher who thought that I ought to consider it, and he encouraged that I consider a career in medicine. So I reached that decision when I was about a junior, at the end of my junior year. But it never happened because in my senior year, first of all, I decided I would put that desire to go into medicine on the back burner because there was no way that I could see financially to go into medicine. And so I put that on my back burner. And then in the spring of my senior year, which would be 1941, I got a note from the local draft board. And
Greetings.
Greetings, and the note told me not to plan anything beyond graduation. because you're going to be called into the service sometime in the summer of 1941. I would like to say something about my, that's how I never got into, I'll take that up a little bit later, never got into teaching because I had to go directly into the war. I want to tell you something about my college work. I'm proud of making the varsity baseball team. I'm proud because in Canaan High School we never had anybody who taught us any fundamentals of basketball or baseball. And I seem to have knowledge or ability in baseball, and I loved baseball. And so I made the varsity team in my junior and senior year. And at the end of our season, I rode back from Lowell, Massachusetts, where we played our last game, and I sat next to my coach on the bus. And he put his hand on my knee like that, and he said, "Lou, I'm going to miss you next year." He said, "I want you to know that you are the best third baseman that I ever coached." And I'm proud of that.
Yeah, I would think so.
Very proud of that.
I would think so. Oh, that was wonderful. So you must have been a natural athlete.
Yeah, well, that had to be natural. I didn't learn any fundamentals in Canaan.
Yeah, that's.
So
did
anyway,
did you have gym in high school at that time? Was that a requirement in high school?
In high school?
Yeah.
No, nothing was required. We only had baseball and basketball. We played a basketball up in the old town hall, and you had a big wood fire in one corner and one in the other corner. And
can you imagine this today? I mean, in our litigious society, having kids play basketball in a non-regulation size with wood stoves in either corner. Oh no, 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 no.
So following this up, then after graduation, I couldn't do anything to plan for the future, so I had to wait for a call from the draft board. So I got a job working for the Railway Express, going around delivering. In those days, they were very busy delivering trunks and big stuff, and drove a truck around delivering those and picking them up. And I worked with Vic Cole and Herman Stecker. See, and then I played baseball with the town team, the Canaan town team, in the Interstate League. And they didn't have a pitcher, so they asked me to be a pitcher since I had a strong arm having played third base in college. So I said, well, I'll give it a try. And so we ended up winning the championship. I won every game all that summer. The first game I pitched was 9 innings. I never pitched 9-inning game before. I used to do some pitching in high school, but they were all 7-inning games. So anyway, the first game I won was 10-0, and I pitched a 2-hitter. And we finally won the championship. And we played our last game against Litchfield, and that was on the Lawrence Field diamond. And a couple days after that, excuse me, I took off for the Army.
So you did just get through the summer, and then it was off to the service. Now we had just entered the war then. It was must have been.
We weren't at Pearl Harbor yet.
Oh, we weren't. So they drafted you before Pearl Harbor then. Oh,
Pearl Harbor was in December.
Yeah, I didn't.
I went in the service September 11th.
I didn't realize they were drafting before the war actually got started. That's interesting. Was it general? I mean, were young men being called up a lot?
Oh, everybody of the age, they were called up.
Yeah, so they were ready to mobilize.
Yeah.
Was there a general feeling in the area that we were going to go to war?
Well, there's quite a feeling because they were calling all this up, building airplanes and training pilots. In fact, the matter is, when I was at college, my junior and senior year, we were offered a free course in flying.
Oh, really?
Which they never told us was trying to train us to be pilots. So I learned on a Piper Cub to learn how to fly first, and then my second year, I was a senior, and I flew a Waco UPF-7 biplane, and that was all maneuvers, all stunt flying, and we were practicing all the military maneuvers, you see, in case we got
So they
into
were
that.
doing a little natural selection. They were
Yeah, we were
finding the
doing
people.
all of that, and then I did a lot of flying out of the Canaan airport during that summer that I was home. But then, when I got drafted in the Army, I just forgot all about it, and I gave up flying completely.
Now tell me about your Army career.
Well, I was drafted on September 11th, and I went first of all to Fort Devens to check in there, and then I stayed there about a month, and then they sent me to Fort Knox, Kentucky for my basic training. And I was training in the Armored Force there. The Armored Force was a new branch of the service. They were replacing the old horse type of army, that horse-drawn army. And so my training was in the Armored Engineer Corps. And then I was just finishing my basic training when Pearl Harbor came along. And then from there, I was transferred to the 1st Armored Division, which just returned from maneuvers in Louisiana, and Fort Knox was their base camp. So I joined them, and they had me, they were preparing to go overseas, so they used me, they put me in the medical detachment, and I was giving shots for all the soldiers for their going overseas.
They must have loved you.
And then they were just getting ready to move out, and then they sent me to the Armored Force Officer Training Center, which was located at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And so I went there and took a 3-month course and graduated in May of 1942 as a 2nd lieutenant. And then I was assigned to the 3rd Armored Division, which was located down in Camp Oak, Louisiana. So I joined them right after graduating as a 2nd lieutenant. And so I remained with the 3rd Armored Division all through the war.
And you eventually made it to England.
Well, after training at Fort Knox Fort Camp Polk for a little while, then we were shipped out to the Mojave Desert by train.
Oh, really?
We had a big freight train, all the tanks and all the armored equipment was on flat cars. And it took us, I don't know how many days. We were right out in the middle of the Mojave Desert. We were the first unit to go out there. And we had to chop down the brush, the cactus plants and all of that, and set up our tents. And I guess the first day we got about 5 or 6 those sidewinder rattlesnakes. And so we trained there for the rest of the month, and then we were shipped back to Camp Pickett, Virginia. And from there we were supposedly going to sail out of Norfolk, Virginia, and make a beach landing at Casablanca in northern France. But that order was changed temporarily, and so they shipped us out of Camp Pickett up to Indiantown Gap in Pennsylvania, just a little bit north and east of Harrisburg. And we remained there for about 9 months until the following fall. And then we moved from there to a place in New Jersey. I've forgotten the name of the camp there, and then sailed out of Pier 56 just about a week later. And we were in a convoy going overseas. It was the largest convoy of the war, and it was a sight to see. When you look as far as you could see on the ocean, and you would see ships. And there were submarines in our area, and there were they had to drop some
Depth charges.
I don't know whether they ever got any submarines or not. But anyway, we sailed to England. And then in England, we trained for about 9 months on the Salisbury Plain. That was just east of Bath, England, in southern England. And while I was there, I was sent to Sandhurst, which is the English version of our West Point.
Yeah.
And I was sent there for a crash course on military intelligence. And because I was doing some reconnaissance work, and I was going to have to use that in military intelligence when we got in combat. And so eventually we shipped out of Southampton across the English Channel, and this was on Omaha Beach. We landed on Omaha Beach.
Did you go in on D-Day?
Yes, not on D-Day. I did just a few days after that, because we had to wait until the infantry got an area maybe 200 yards or something in depth, so you could go in. But going across the channel, there were airplanes flying both ways, and there were ships going both ways. Some ships were carrying the supplies over, and others were carrying wounded people back to England. And so that's the way it went. And then the big, we were fighting there in this area where they had these big mounds of dirt all around the fields, and they're very difficult to get from one field to another. And so finally General Bradley, they had an idea of saturating 10 square miles of area in the St. Lo, Normandy area, some 10 square miles, saturating it with bombs. And so we were told one particular day at around 1 o'clock to pull back immediately to the top of this hill, back a few hundred yards, and the airplanes are going to come over and bomb the area right in front of us. So they had 2,000 four-engine bombers.
Wow.
B-17s and B-24s, and 500 fighter bombers. There were P-51s, P-38s, and P-47s over the area. And they saturated that whole area with bombs. And then we moved out in a column, an armored division. They used the blitzkrieg type of warfare, where the armor overruns the territory and move as fast as you can. And they move in the columns, three columns.
Excuse me just a second, Fred, I'm going to cough. Could you turn it off? Will do.
The method of combat was traveling in three separate columns. Each column is made up of about 5,000 men, and you have tanks, you have infantry, you have supplies, you have all the things that you need, and then you also have medical detachment with you. So 3 columns, and they took a course of about 10 miles wide, and they were parallel to each other and never traveled on main highways, all on secondary roads. And I had the hard job of being riding the front vehicle in the Jeep in one of the armored columns. And my job was to read the maps and remain on the exact area that is set up for us for our column to travel. And when you run into resistance, if I survive, then I get on the radio and I call the first tank would be within sight behind me everywhere we traveled. And so they would take over to clean out the resistance, and then I had to find a place to pull them off the highway during the night, and then set up peripheral guard, check those guards at night, and sometimes I'd have to move forward, say about 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, to make a reconnaissance trip, check out a bridge to see if the bridge is still intact, so whether we can move along the next day to go across the bridge, or whether we have to have the engineers come in and put another pontoon bridge in and that sort of stuff. So I never got very much sleep. I'd be lucky to get 2 hours sleep at night.
When Jeremiah was 15, I took him over to France, and we stayed on a farm in Normandy. And the farmer couldn't speak English, but he was a very hospitable man. So the first night we were there, he took Jeremiah out to the barn, and in the barn was the current crop of bombs that he was plowing up out of his field. You talk about the saturating bombing. Here we were. Let me see, it was 94 that I took him over there. It was 50th anniversary. And there were they still bringing up bombs out of the field. So he had a stack, that was 2 or 3 feet high. And periodically he would call people, and they would come and take the bombs away. But there seemed to be no end to them. They got them every spring. Struck me as being very dangerous.
Yeah. So as far as then where we ended up traveling, we went through 5 major campaigns. The first was Normandy, and the second was northern France, and the third was the Rhineland, and the fourth was the Ardennes, better known as the Belgian Bulge, and the last was the Central Europe. And so we traveled really from Omaha Beach to the Elbe River, which is just short of Berlin, say 20 miles or so from Berlin. And I had maps all the way into Berlin, but I never had to go that route because they wouldn't let us go any further than the Elbe River.
Yeah, the Russians went into Berlin, didn't they? Weren't
Yeah,
they?
the Russians were there.
Well, it sounds like you certainly saw enough of Europe during your stay over there and got to see it all hours of the day.
You might be interested in knowing my promotions through here. Of course, when I went overseas, I had already been given a first lieutenant job, and then I remained a first lieutenant until we were halfway through Germany, and then I finally got a promotion to captain, and then when I became a captain, instead of doing a captain's job, they gave me a major's job.
Oh, really?
And it was the same thing when I became a captain. I was doing a major's job, and then when I became a major, I was doing a lieutenant colonel's job. I got after about 2.5 months being a captain, I was promoted to major, and I was just 26 years old at the time, and I had command of about 650, 700 men.
Wow.
And believe it or not, at 26 years of age, I was an infantry captain. See, my branch was infantry, combat infantry, and I was very uneasy, and so many times a colonel or a general would see me wearing gold leaves. As a major, they would ask me if I'm impersonating a major or whether I am one, and then I had to take out my promotion orders. But I was very uncomfortable because ordinarily you didn't see an infantry major less than about 34, 35 years of age. So.
Now, you were in Germany at the time that the war ended. Did you stay there long?
I stayed in Germany for 6 months after the war ended. They had a point system worked up right after the war ended, and it was based on how many days of combat you had, how many days you've been overseas, how many decorations did you have, and so on. It's a point thing. So just after the war ended, they began shipping people back to the States on the basis of any points they had. And we were, at that time, we had pulled back into the Harz Mountains, and we had a tent there, and I remember being in that tent, and there was a telephone call came in to us from regimental headquarters, and they wanted the name of the person in my unit with the most points to be rotated back to the States. And the Sergeant Toller Johnson, took the call, and he gave my name. Major Segalla's got the most points, so he's to be rotated. Well, the regimental commander happened to be stepping on he's at the entrance into the tent, and he said, "Sergeant, what is this all about?" And he said, "Well, Colonel Russell up in your office wanted to know the name of the person in this battalion with the most points to be rotated back to the States," and I gave him Major Segalla's name. And the colonel said to him, "Sergeant, you call right back up there and you cancel that and you give him some other name. The war," these are the words he used, "the war might be over, but we might have to go to the Pacific. And if we go to the Pacific, I want Segalla with me."
Oh, no.
So I ended up then, shortly after that, I was sent to Sorbonne, the University of Paris. Took a crash course in military government. And then I went back to my unit and set up military government. And then I remained there until October. And then I sailed home during the World Series. It was in October that year.
Just in time.
I had transferred from the 3rd Armored Division to the 7th Armored Division for purposes of going home. And the 3rd Armored Division remained over there, well, really until the Persian Gulf War came along, and then they got called from Germany to go to the Persian Gulf War. And they're the unit that made the big run around the rear of the Iraqi places and knocked out all those tanks 200 in one day.
Wow, was it good to get home?
Oh, yes. I kissed the ground when I got off the
I
ship.
bet you did. That was a long time up to be away.
Yeah. Now, yes, you're interested in the awards.
Okay.
Well, the first award was the Combat Infantry Badge. That's a very distinctive badge. It's a blue badge with a rifle back. You know, combat infantry. That's a hard life. So then I had 2 Bronze Stars, and I had the French Croix de Guerre for the liberation of France, and then I had the Belgian Fourragère for the liberation of Belgium, and I had the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the 2nd highest military award. So those are the...
Now, did you consider, you obviously were successful, did you consider possibly staying in the Army after the war was over?
That's a very interesting question. I had a West Point colonel who was my immediate commander above me, and he tried to talk me in the worst way of staying in the Army. And he said, "Here's my argument." He said, "You are now you're 26 years old. You have a rank of major. Now, if you go to West Point," he said, "you have to be in the service for 10 years in order to have a permanent rank of captain. Now, your rank now is a temporary rank," but he said, "I know enough people back in the War Department." They didn't have all the setup they have now, the Pentagon. They had a War Department. "I know enough people back there that I can guarantee you that they will drop you back from permanent rank of major to temporary rank of major to permanent rank of captain, and then you can go on what's the name that I want? Promotion list according to how many years of service. If you keep your nose clean, you see. So here I had 4.5 years in the permanent rank of captain.
Twice as fast as the
So
West
I'm
Pointers.
5.5 years ahead,
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
But I said, no thanks. I said, I don't think I want to hang around officers' barracks and pulling these one-armed bandit machines and all the boozing that goes on, and then you have to entertain the colonels and the generals whether you like them or not, and all this sort of stuff. And I said, I think I can do more for humanity by doing something else other than learning how to fight a war. So at least he tried, but I didn't bite.
Excuse me. So you came back to Canaan?
Came back to Canaan.
And did you have ideas about what you wanted to do?
Well, then I had to, well, let's see, I was discharged. I arrived back from overseas. It was in October. And then I was on leave that I had coming to me until January 6, 1946. So I was discharged from the Army on January 6, 1946. So all the while I was trying to figure out what I'm going to do next, and I thought about this thing that I had on the back burner about going into some field of medicine or some other field like dentistry or anything else related. And so I was a toss-up between dentistry and medicine, and so I chose the dentistry because of one thing, because of my age. I was now 27 years old, and if I went into medicine, I'd have to go 4 years medical school, 2 years internship, and then residency, and I'd probably be 35, 36 years old before I was earning a living. So I found out that I could get one of these accelerated courses in dentistry, and I knew Northwestern University out in Chicago had one of those courses, and you go 3 years, going year-round, 3 years, and so you do 4 years work in 3, and so I started then at Northwestern. I started in June of 1946, graduated in 1949.
And you did that on the GI Bill?
On the GI Bill. That's the thing that brought me away from teaching. If I were going back into a teaching position, which in those days were paying about $2,700 a year beginning, and I would have to go back and take a year of post-grad work in order to brush up on it, because I was then 5 years away from it with no experience in teaching. So I wouldn't know what it was all about. So I've never regretted it, because it was a choice that I made, and I think I got into my real God-given talent because I had such joy and satisfaction in my work, and I just enjoyed every bit of it.
That's lovely. And so many people don't like what they do. I think that's obviously a war is not nice, but isn't it wonderful that you were afforded a way of getting the medical education that you might not have otherwise gotten?
It was not only I, but
a lot
all
of
the others too. A lot of them. And I think we deserved it.
I'm sure you did.
It was a good thing.
I'm sure you did. Did you ever consider leaving Canaan? My mother always says, for instance, that most of the folks from Canaan who were swept up in that war, many of them had never been outside of Canaan before, and that they really saw different parts of this country and different parts of the world for the first time, and she thinks that that war was a precipitating factor in the mobility that we had later. Of course, we also had better road systems and better cars and all of that, but did you ever think about leaving Canaan?
No, I've always enjoyed living in Canaan. So I was in Canaan all my life, except going to college and going to war and going to dental school out in Chicago. And then I came back to Canaan, and I had 35 years practice in Canaan.
You married here?
Well, the marriage thing, in my senior year at dental school, well, first of all, backing up, I ended up marrying Alice Brogy, and she was my childhood sweetheart.
Really?
And we were classmates in first grade, starting in first grade. We graduated from the same high school class, 1937. She waited for me all through college, through the war. We corresponded through the war, through dental school. And then in my senior year in dental school, by February, I had completed all of my clinical requirements, and so I was guaranteed I was going to graduate. So we decided to get married, and so we got married in the Holy Name Cathedral in Chicago. Got married on a weekend, and then finished my course there and graduated in June, and I came back to Canaan, set up office in Canaan.
She's quite a lady to wait that long. That's a stretch. That was, what, 9 years, something like that?
Well, she knew what she was getting. So,
and then you entered into civic life here. You've always been very active.
well, let me first of all, if I may, Kathy, I dedicated my whole professional career, dentistry, to the poor, the low income, and the minorities. And I wanted to be sure, since I came from a poor family, uneducated family, I never wanted to have anybody say they couldn't afford to have dentistry, regardless of what whether they have any money or whether they don't have any money. So I kept low fees, so everybody else was getting 3 and 4 times what I was getting for the same work. I did this intentionally now, because this is part of what I learned at Springfield College. It's what they termed the humanics philosophy, which means loving and serving other people. So I kept low fees. I did a lot of work for nothing, thousands of dollars work for nothing. I never refused anybody for an emergency call out of office at any time, no matter what time, the day or night. Not one person that I ever turned away. And so this is the way I planned it, and every single day in my office, when I'd go in my office in the morning, I would look at the list of patients who were coming in that day, and I would pick out 1 or 2 of those patients who I thought could use some help and would appreciate it. And I would do that person's work for that day for nothing. I would simply write on my chart for the person and in my appointment book, NC, meaning no charge. Another thing I used to do, I exercised professional courtesy. Free dental work for all physicians and their families, all dentists and their families, all lawyers and their families, all nurses and their families, free. Getting close to Christmas, I would take 1 or 2 days before Christmas, sometimes 3 or 4 days before Christmas, and I would do everybody's work those days and for no charge, and I would offer that little act of charity up to God in appreciation for the God-given talents that He gave me and the fact that He brought me through the war. And I've always felt that it was by God that I was able to get through the war, because I've always felt that He preserved my life so that I could go into dentistry and to serve these poor people. And that's what life is all about.
Do you think Canaan had a particularly large population of poor folks in those days?
Well, sure, we had a lot of poor blacks, you know. I can remember blacks calling you at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and they'd come in, and then before I get them seated, and they'd say to me, "Now look, I don't have any money. Now if you want to take care of me, okay. If you don't, that's okay too. I'll try to go someplace else." I said, "Get out." I said, "I don't want to hear about that. You get in that chair, and never mind about the money." And when I'm finished, let's say maybe I extracted 3-4 teeth and nothing left but roots, and they say, how much am I going to owe you? I said, you're not going to owe me anything.
Yeah, poor souls.
Hardly anything, see? He
Yeah.
said, I'll pay you when I get to work. So this is what I've done. And what I can say about this, describe it as best I can. I use these words when I received the Distinguished Alumnus Award. I use these words in the latter part of my acceptance speech. I said, the manner in which I lived my life and practiced my profession did not bring me financial wealth. That was never my goal or intent. It did, however, give me a wealth of deep down inner joy and satisfaction which no amount of money can buy. And that is far more important because I happen to believe that when the time of our particular sunset comes, our accomplishments and our material gains won't really matter a great deal, but the clarity and the care with which we have loved and served others will be the great gift of our life.
I agree with you entirely.
That's my whole philosophy, and that's summarizes the way I live my life.
So this became kind of a personal mission when you came back to conduct this crusade, essentially, to help other folks.
Well, this is what I tried to do, and I had the inspiration and determination to make something of my life. And you might want to go into this Distinguished Alumnus Award.
Well, let's touch on that now, since it's a natural place to do it. Why don't you describe what that was all about?
Well, it's the wording of this award is that it is given in recognition of professional excellence in one's chosen field and outstanding service to the community and to the state or the nation. That's the wording of it. The Springfield College selects 1 or 2 persons each year from the alumni body of some 30,000 people, and they give this award. I received my award in 1988.
How are you nominated for something like that?
My class executive committee, if they trace the person's history and their accomplishments, and if they feel they're worthy for an award, they will write up a recommendation and forward that recommendation to the awards selection committee. And that committee then
Chooses among those.
chooses one.
Well, that's wonderful. That's a marvelous award. That must have made you feel so good to know that all of that work and all of that dedication to people had been recognized.
It is. So the nice part about it is that it covers professional excellence, which is very important, and then your service to your community and to the state or the nation. And mine is for the nation for my work in the war. And I guess you haven't gotten into some of the achievements at the local level or community.
Well, that was going to be my next question.
Oh, okay.
I was going to lead into that.
Reading your mind.
You must have been seeing it forming. Let's talk about your local activities. I looked at your curriculum vitae there a little bit, and it looks like you were a very active citizen as well as a very active medical practitioner.
Yeah. Well, this is one thing that Northwestern University Dental School taught, and they emphasized it. They emphasized that we get involved in our community activities to give back to the community what we are getting from our patients. And so this is how this has all come about. And so I got involved in it immediately. One of the first jobs I had was I was elected to the Board of Education. And I got voted in by the members as a chairman. And then for a long time, for some 10 years, the community wanted a new school.
Right.
and they had a committee working on that for about 10 years, and they had people on that committee who really didn't want a new school, and yet they were on this committee. And they just sit back and wait until the community raises questions about what's going on, and then they would say, oh, we got to make some changes. So I didn't, when I started this job working on it, I didn't even look to see what they had already accomplished. I started from scratch, and in a matter of 2 years on my term of office, we had a new school built.
That was 1954 that the school was built?
I don't remember the years. It's around 54, 55, somewhere in there. And I'm very proud of that. And I put, having had a training at Springfield College, on education, I put a lot of my own input into some of the architectural work in the building. And I was very pleased when I got out of office and the school had opened, that I would go over in the morning and see how things are going, how the kids are coming in, whether things are running smoothly or not. I would go over at noon time, see how lunch is going, and then at the end of the day and see how things are. I would ask teachers if you had anything that you wanted changed here. Are there anything? What are they? The only one that they wanted changed were the Anderson windows that had a handle on them, and the handle didn't fold in, and the person walked through the main corridor, and they would hook their clothes on the handle. And my answer to that was, well, that's the only kind they had at the time. So we had to do it.
This is a pretty small complaint.
Yeah. So then after that, I got involved in the new town hall. And I went to a town meeting one night, and they were talking about this town hall, and they had already had plans to convert the old high school building, convert that, just use the downstairs and convert it into a town hall. And I listened to all the arguments, and I said, I can't go along with your idea of converting that. There's an old building, you're going to have to paint it all the while. You have to make driveway into there, parking area. You have to spend a lot of money in there, and I think you'd be better off if you could build a new building. Well, Frank Whiting was one that thought it was going to cost too much. And so I said, well, what do you consider too much? And so he said, well, I don't. His answer was that I don't think we should do it until we got the regional high school debt paid off. So I said, using my experience on building the school, I can give you a pretty close estimate of what it would cost to build our town hall, if you tell me how many square feet you want. So they worked on that, and then next meeting we had, they gave me how many square feet they wanted in each room and how many rooms they wanted. So I drew my own plans, drew it to scale, showing all the rooms that they wanted, the selectman's office and all the rest of the rooms. And I put an extra room in for tax collector, because the tax collector then was Pete Foley, and he was having all the records in his own office. And I added on 2 additional rooms while we were doing it for future expansion. And so we went back to the meeting, and so I took an estimate. I said, this building will not cost us, in my opinion, won't cost us more than $75,000.
Wow.
And they disputed it. And I said, they said, how do you know? I said, well, I've asked 3 different local builders to give me an estimate of that number of square feet with the same type of building that the school is. And so the highest bid that I had was $75,000, and I had one as low as is $68,000. So they said, well, we can't go by that. I said, well, I understand your point too, but the only way we can know is if you put the thing out for bid. And you put it out to bid, then if you don't like the figures, then just forget about it. So one thing led to another, and they finally got it out to bid, and the bid figure came in as $58,000 some dollars, and then there were something like $2,200 for rock ledge excavation. That makes it $60,000. Then there was $3,000 for the architect. So you were around $65,000. And the architect used the same floor plan, exactly the same floor plan that I had drawn. The only thing he added on it was the stone pillar at the entrance and the flower boxes on the windows. Those are the only things he added. I picked the site for the town hall. I picked that myself because we already owned that land. The parking lot was already there. The utilities, the water and electricity and sewer were already there for the school. So all we had to do was put the school up over there on the edge of the parking lot where it is now, and you didn't have to pay anything for parking areas, driveways, or anything like that. And so it went through, and the town people were very happy, and the Board of Education, well, wait, not the board, no, I'm getting ahead of myself now. After this town meeting, Sarah Walker, who was the secretary of the selectmen, called me on the phone after this meeting, and they said, Louis, they said, the selectmen want to tell you that you're the guy that messed everything up at the meeting last night. They were ready to move the next day after that meeting to
the other school.
Convert the old school into a new town hall, and they had figures of something like $50,000 for it. So if you would bring us architect's drawing, so we can see the architect's drawing, and then your figures on the whole thing, then we'll know better. And what they want to tell you too is that you will not have any funds to pay for the architect. Oh, I said, is that so? Well, I'll tell you what, Sarah, I said, I will accept that. I said, I will take care of all the funds necessary to pay for the architect's drawings of the floor plan. And so what I did was I exchanged dental services for architectural services and got the job done that way.
I don't know how they could possibly say that. I mean, how could they possibly do that?
Well, so I've always felt that if the town wanted to put something up in my honor, they could take the town hall or they could take the school, either one or the other. So either one or the other.
Well, I think that's a valid point.
They called it the Ella Brown Town Hall because there was some money that she got from that little brick building that used to be down in the Lawrence Playground, and that money was used to pay for part of the town hall, so they named that in her honor, but they never did name the school in anybody's honor.
Well, they ought to consider a plaque or something like that anyway.
So then you want some of the other activities in the community. I'll see if I can remember them all. Well, I was a Grand Night from Knights of Columbus. I served 2 terms, Knights of Columbus, and I received the Knight of the Year thing for my service during that time in office. Let's see. I served on the fire district committee. Served with your father, Fred, and I and Lawrence Eddy got together and we drew up a new set of bylaws that's now in existence. So I was there on that committee for quite a long time. And I'm also chairman of the Bitterman Center in my church over there. I selected the site and did the drawing for it and chaired the whole thing. And so
That was in the early 60s or the late 60s that happened?
I think that was in the late 50s, I believe. Well, maybe the 60s, somewhere in there. But that's beside the point, really, in a year. And then I served on the Canaan Savings Bank board. I was a trustee on that board, and I chaired, let's see, 2 or 3 positions. I was chairman of the salary committee, nomination committee, and pension committee. And I remember Oliver Eldridge saying when this chairman of the nominations committee, I picked people whom I thought would be good members on the board, regardless of their color of their skin or their nationality or whether they're Catholics or not. And so we got some Italians and Catholics on the board. Henry Pozzetta was one, Frank Perotti was another one, and they worked out well. And I remember the last meeting that we had with the Canaan Savings Bank before they merged with the state bank. Oliver Eldridge was bank president at the time, and I remember him saying, "I am surprised and I'm very happy about what has happened since I came here to work on this bank in 1955. He said, back in those days, he said, it seemed like you had to belong to the Congregational Church and be in some way related to Alan Fuller, either by marriage or what. But now, he says, we have Catholics, we have Italians, and we have every kind. And he said, I think that's good for our bank. And the fact of the matter is, I am the first Italian and Catholic to be elected to the Savings Bank Board. So Henry Pozzetta used to call me the Jackie Robinson of the Canaan Savings Bank.
Doesn't it seem silly? I mean, prejudice is deadly serious, but it's also ultimately so silly. And you think about what you folks went through when you were young and the kinds of remarks that were made to you, and nobody even thinks about that anymore. The Italian families in town, I don't think, encounter anything like that anymore.
I'm very happy and glad to say that situation doesn't exist anymore. At least I don't know it. There's respect now and gratitude for us rather than this hatred that was there. And it's entirely changed.
It's so silly that it ever existed, but I think it just is a wonderful example of how inane prejudice is. Because you folks, that separative kind of remark always makes me cringe a little bit, but the immigrant families that came into this area were hardworking, decent folks. What were people thinking about, you know? It just doesn't seem at all reasonable.
My folks were very generous doing for other people. I remember my father when he was selling wood. Now the old St. Joseph's Church is up where the Bitterman Center is, and they had a furnace in the basement. They burned wood, and for all the years they were there, he furnished all of the wood for that church, and he never submitted a bill.
Did in the earliest years, did the Italian families tend to cluster together because of the language barrier and things like that? I mean, were they a small subsection of the town? Or were they pretty well integrated in the total community? Well,
they were in little areas of the town. You had the area there in the Dealey Road, people, and all Italians were in there. Up in my area, there were all Italians. There were the Segallas and the Smerriais, and there was one Irish family up there, but there was the Viscontis also. So they were in little communities, but then there were a lot of Segallas, and they married, and now they carry other names, and so many of them are here in town, and they've all been good citizens. I've been proud to say that I'm a Segalla.
Were the Irish discriminated against when they came in?
When they came here, sure.
Yeah.
Sure, when they came here.
So if you were new,
But being good citizens and, my father was always proud that after many years here, they had much respect for him, and he was on the Board of Selectmen at
Oh,
one
was he
time.
really? Well, that's
Yeah.
good.
And the same thing happened with Ned DeLone.
Oh, yeah. I was a reporter when Ned was first selectman.
Ned couldn't make up a little speech. I used to be a speechwriter for him.
Really? So now let's talk a little bit about your family. We don't want to forget your family. You had children here.
Oh, yeah. We had 6 children.
6.
Had 5 girls and 1 boy.
Well, reverse of your family, practically.
I have 5 of them are still alive. I lost my youngest daughter
Oh, that's right,
in
I remember.
1980.
Yeah.
I lost my wife May 25th, 1980, and then 3 months later, September 3rd, I lost my youngest daughter, 17
goodness.
years old.
Oh, my goodness. That must have just been horrible.
So we have and 4 girls left and 1 boy.
And you have grandchildren here?
Oh yes, I have grandchildren. Dina has 5. My daughter Pia has 3 over in the New York State. She lives there. My daughter Martina, our second daughter, lives in Vienna, Austria. And she has
Oh, really?
She has 1 daughter, very brilliant daughter. She was selected from. She goes to a private school over there. She's in the high school level now, and she was selected to be the country of Austria's representative in some educational meeting down in Rome, and she
Wow.
was shipped down there.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, she's a very smart girl.
Well, it sounds like a wonderful life. It really
And my
is.
son Peter he has a place in New York, he has an apartment in New York, and he owns a house in Salisbury. He's in the interior design work. And he's very successful now. It's hard going in the beginning.
Well, I think that sounds like a fantastic life that you've had, a very fulfilling life.
Yeah.
Is there anything we missed that you'd like to mention?
Well, I thought it would be good to maybe to repeat that little thing that I recited to you on how I live my life and practice my profession, if I might do that as a closer for it all.
Sure.
I said the manner in which I lived my life and practiced my profession did not bring me financial wealth. That was never my goal or intent. It did, however, give me a wealth of deep down inner joy and satisfaction, which no amount of money can buy. And that is far more important, because I happen to believe that when the time of our particular sunset comes, our accomplishments and our material gains won't really matter a great deal, but the clarity and the care with which we have loved and served others will be the great gift of our life.
It's a wonderful philosophy.
And thank you very much, Kathy, for
This was
having me
fun.
here. I enjoyed it very much.
This was fun.